Hello and welcome to this new video in the SQL section. In this video, we will learn how to create a table. So far, we have seen in the previous video how to create a database. So as I explained the hierarchy earlier, you have a SQL server. Inside that you can have one or more databases, and inside each databases you will have tables. So table is the entity where actually your data is going to get saved, and table is nothing but a representation of rows and columns. But the physical entity which holds your data is the table. Inside each database you can have n number of tables. There is no hard limit on the number of tables inside a database, but there is a limit on the number of objects in a database. When I say objects, table is an object. How can you define an object? Simply put, it means an entity which exists physically. As simple as that. So just like tables, we'll see other objects also. When you combine all these objects, there is a limit to it, which I'll let you know separately. But that limit is way too higher, and you will not end up creating those many tables ever. So we have the server, we have the database. Inside that, when I expand, under this I see tables. Now just like databases has system databases, tables will have system tables. And we created our own database. Now we will create our own tables. And the way we created right click a database by doing right click and by the create command, the same way I will show you create table procedure also. So right click on your tables and say new and say table. There are different types of tables, but most probably we end up using just a normal table. So we'll click on this. Now this is through the interface. This is not how we do usually, but I'm just showing you as a beginning. Now each table must have minimum one column. A table is nothing but a representation or a structure of rows and columns. The columns need to have some names. So what you need is you need to give a name. For example, let us say I want to create a table called employees, which stores the employees information. So the first column name I'm going to type over here is employee ID. Then hit a tab. The second thing that you need to provide is a data type. Now SQL is very specific in terms of data types. So when you define a column, when you want to create a column or when you want to define a column, you have to specify the data type at the time of creation. This is very important. Specifically, if you're coming from an environment where you have worked extensively in Excel, you don't care what you type in a column or in a cell in Excel. You can type number, you can type text, it accepts everything. And there are no restrictions imposed. But that is not the way how the table is in a database. This is where you will start learning the data warehousing concepts. As I said, data warehousing is one of the things that you will learn in this course. But data warehousing is nothing different. There is no different tool to it. Data warehousing is a concept which are defined by the experts of the industry or whoever founded them. And those concepts are implemented in the SQL databases, and we are going to learn them slowly and steadily. So this is one first thing, that when you define a column, you need to also define the data type. So employee ID, I want this to be a numeric column. For numeric column, if you pull the drop down, there are various data types. And the simplest one that we will search for, or you can also type over here, is integer or int. Integer is a number without decimal. And there is one more thing, is allow nulls. For right now, I am not going to explain you about nulls. We'll come to this later on. So this is a table with a single column. If you now want to create it, you just say Control S. It will ask you for a name. I say employees. Okay. And you can close this. Just refresh this. Now you see on the left hand side, this logo or icon indicates it's a table. See the logo difference for a table and a database. Both are different. If you expand this, under that you will see columns. And if you expand that, you will see the column name and the data type. This null keyword has some importance. We'll come to that later on. So table in SQL Server or any database needs to have minimum one column. Without it, you cannot create a table. And the maximum number of columns in a normal table is in SQL Server is 1024. You can have multiple columns also. Let's say you created this table and you want to add more column. Simply you can do right click, design. So you come back to that same design, click at the second row and just keep on adding the name of columns you want, tab and the data type. Now the employee name cannot be numeric because it will have alphabets like A to Z. So what you do is there is a different data type for this. Again, if you've never been into data world and you've just maybe worked on a very beginner level or have used Excel to a very minimum level, in Excel broadly you classify the data as either text or number, but that's not the case in SQL. It has various data types, and that's what we need to know. So when it comes to defining a text column which can accept only like alphabets, let's say, or alphanumeric, there is a data type to it, and this data type is a character data type. And the ones which we are going to introduce right now is a data type called as varchar. Varchar. Var stands for variable length of characters. Varchar stands for variable. Var stands for variable. Char means characters. Now by default it takes 50. What this means is you can insert up to 50 characters. If you insert above 50 characters, 0 to 50 characters, the max is 50, it will truncate it or chop it. So this is something that you can change. It also has an upper limit, which I'll talk about later on. So I'll change it to 100. What this means, I am defining a column name called employee name, and which has the data type varchar and can have maximum 100 characters, from 0 to 100 characters. Save this, close this, and you can refresh this. Now if you see, there are two columns. This is the way you can create a table and columns into it, define the data types by using the interface. However, as I said earlier, everything we don't want to learn through interface. It is just the beginning couple of steps. But I want to learn all of this through query. So now let us jump in to the query part, how we did it the same way earlier for databases. So now since we want to write a query, I'll quickly do Control N or new query window. And here I'll start typing. So as I said earlier, if you want to create something, you just say create. But now I want to create a table and not a database. Hence I'll change my keyword from database to table. So this is, how easy it will be for you to remember. And that's what I said earlier. The names which they have chosen are for the operations are quite, familiar or, very easy to remember in terms of the operation. So create database, create table. Now you just need to give the name of the table. Now I cannot give employee's name again, because if I want to create an employee's table, because it is already there. So what I do, before I want to create, either I choose any other name or I can drop this, right click, delete, and OK. Be very careful. Once you delete, you end up losing the table with the data in it. So now there is no table called employees. Let me create an employees table. So how is the syntax? Have a look at this. Create table employees. You cannot run this query only this much, because as I said, every table needs at least one column, and there is a syntax how you can write. So open the bracket, close the bracket, and within this you have to write the column definition. The column definition consists of few things, at least 3 things to start with, and then further more things can come, out of which 2 things you have to write compulsorily. One, or the first, is the name of the column, and the second is the data type. So the one column which I want towards the beginning is employee ID. Okay, you can write in whatever case you want. SQL is not case sensitive, just an FYI. And then the data type, which is int. That's it. This is the minimum syntax that you can write to create a table. Now I'll create this. It is done. If I refresh the tables folder, I can see employees table over here. And if I want to drop this table, I'll just say drop table instead of drop database as we did earlier, table name. Select this query and be very careful. As I said earlier, select the query that you want to run and execute it. Now if you refresh, no longer you will see that table. This is the way how you create the table by SQL query, SQL language. And it's going to be fun. Few more things. This applies, whatever I'm going to say now, for all the SQL statements. It is not compulsory that you write your statement in one line or multiple lines. As long as the query is valid, it is fine. What it means is I can break this query down into multiple lines also. It is still a valid statement. I'll give a tab over here, but tab is not part of syntax. It is only for readability. So the bottom line is you can write your query, no longer how lengthy it is, no longer what query it is or what operation you're doing, in a single line also. Now let's see how you can add multiple columns into it. So I just say comma, employee name, and space. Always there should be space between data type and the column name. Here I'll say varchar of 100. Close the bracket. Between two columns definition, you need to give comma. Here you don't need a comma because now I wanted only two columns. So I can write this query in this way also. I'll just copy paste it in a single line. This is also valid. Let me select this. Refresh. Have a look at this. And let me drop it again. Refresh again. And I can select this and run. Both the queries are the same. The only difference is the syntax is same. The only difference is, if you see, now we have the table, that the above query, the first query is broken down into multiple rows. Tab, space, these are all optional things. I am just giving tab for better readability. Or you can write it in one line also. But keep in mind, when you create a table, by using create table, one column required minimum, space, data type. If you have more than one column, between both the column definitions, a comma will come into picture. And all your columns should be enclosed in round brackets. Okay. This is how you end up creating tables. Now this is just a beginner level syntax for create table. And we are going to see many things in create table, but slowly and steadily. This was just to start. So now we just keep revising few things again and again so that they are part of your memory, and if there are any gaps in your understanding, those will be filled. So look at the hierarchy again. SQL Server, multiple databases. Each database will have multiple tables. Table will have rows and columns. And that's where actually your data will be stored. And then we'll go ahead and do Control S and say, save this query. So if I want to use this in future, I can just open it up. Create and drop table. So that's it on a simple table creation and deletion example. Thank you. See you in the next video.